Yeah. Good!
Probably one of the most important things is firearm safety. So let me ask you guys, what are the 5 firearm safety rules, starting with rule number 1?
Treat every weapon as if it were loaded.
Rule number 2.
Never point a weapon at anything not intended to shoot.
Rule number 3.
Keep your fingers straight and off the trigger until you're ready to fire.
Rule number 4.
Your weapon on safe until you intend to fire.
And rule number 5.
Fire your targets and foreground and backdrop.
Remember these firearm safety rules? This is flat range. But out in the real world, when you're having to shoot and move around other people, when you're a law enforcement officer going into an active shooter situation, those rules are following you. They're right with you. And if you decide to shortcut those rules, that's when Murphy's going to bite you right in the ass. So it's outstanding that you guys can come out here and recite those, and I can only hope that when other people go to the range and train, they train to that level as well. So outstanding job.
Every time you come out to the range, especially when you're with a group of shooters or operators or team environment, it's always good to go over your medical brief and ensure that if something does happen, you don't have a bunch of people running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Okay, here we have a great medical facility, so if something happens, first responders will be here probably within seconds. However, you need to take in consideration that if you're out on your own, you are at your own home range, you're maybe going out in the woods with by yourself or with a buddy, or you're hunting, you need to know your surroundings. That's a part of the mindset. You need to know where the nearest hospital is. You need to make sure you always have communication. Make sure you tell somebody where you went in case you do shoot yourself and you're stranded out there with a bleeding wound or something and you need support. You should always have some type of shooter kit. Okay, there's a lot of different first aid kits out there. There's all these different military kits and all the stuff that you carry. That's great, but does it really work for you? Is it what you need in that time frame, whether it's out hunting or out shooting by yourself, or you're in a critical stress engagement, maybe an active shooter, or your home defense and one of your family members are bleeding and it takes 4 or 5 minutes for EMS, or maybe even longer in some cases or locations, to get to your house or to your location. Maybe you are a down police officer in an active shooter situation and you can't get support for an hour. Do you have what it takes with you to stop that bleed and keep you alive for that amount of time? Just be aware of your surroundings, know your medical facilities, and know the number for 911. What is it, Chris?
911.
Okay. All right, we're going to talk about different types of handguns. Depending on your lifestyle, whether you're law enforcement, military, competitive shooter, or you use a full-size gun for home defense or just general everyday range shooting, there's lots of different types of actions that we want to familiarize yourselves with. From striker-fired weapons, there's single action, double action, there's constant action guns now, all different types.
Yeah, and I think it leads into what really fits your need. For instance, this is a striker fire weapon system. Specifically, you'll notice that there is no external hammer on these type of weapon systems, but they are very, very simple to operate. We find that under stress, when you can just pick up a gun, put your finger on the trigger, and start doing your engagement, that the striker fire generally seems to work much better, even in classes when we're teaching students. We find that there are less problems when students utilize these style weapon systems. What you're typically looking at here is a press of the trigger. Once you press that trigger to the rear, the gun cycles. Again, there's no hammer to get in the way. There's nothing that you need to decock. You'll reset, press it again, and the gun goes off. There are internal safeties to this weapon system that make it really, unique in regards to being safe. So if you drop it, you don't need to worry about having what typically would be classified as an external safety. Now on some of these weapon systems, what you'll notice here and over in here, if you can't really see it, is that this gun, you have to get your finger just perfectly on the trigger to allow it to discharge. What you're looking at is there is a preventer here, basically a little bit of a safety block, so that if you pull just a top portion, the gun won't discharge. If this thing came out of your hands under speed, or it was in your hand and you had to dive into a position to take cover and something on the ground ended up getting into that trigger guard area, it's least likely that this gun is going to discharge because your finger has to be perfectly on that trigger to allow that to happen. So striker fire weapon systems generally no hammer, and then every time you pull the trigger, it's the same pull, and then you don't have to worry about doing anything like decocking the weapon system. For your single action style weapon systems, you'll notice that the hammer is forward on this particular weapon system. If I attempt to pull the trigger, it's not going to go off. The only way this weapon system goes off is with the hammer cocked to the rear, and then after you fire the weapon system, the hammer will reset itself. Now this weapon system is a 1911, specifically designed to be what's referred to as cocked, and then with the safety on right here, locked. So this is what I would call a simple weapon system. However, it is like the race car of the gun community, meaning that, most of these are the, Toyotas or Infiniti, so to speak, and now you're getting into the Porsche GTR, because when you go to a 1911, to truly understand the mechanics of it, it is truly a professional's gun, But again, single action, once you disengage the safety, press the trigger, hammer falls, resets itself each and every time. So as far as being complicated, what we've added in there is an external safety, and of course there's a couple other safeties on that particular weapon system as well. Your typical military gun, this is what we refer to as a double action, single action weapon system. It also has a safety and a decocker on this weapon system. So the first thing that I'm going to do is charge the weapon system. Okay, and you'll notice that the hammer is forward on this particular weapon system, and that the safety is in what we refer to as the down on position. To get this gun into the fight, I would have to flip my safety up and off. Red, you're dead. From there, what we're going to do is we're going to pull the trigger. I am cocking it and firing it in one pull. So what we're looking at is the double action pull on this weapon system cocks the weapon system and fires it at the same time. Now, here's where things start to change. Once the gun cycles, the hammer now stays to the rear. So now the weapon system goes into single action. And what you'll notice now is the distance of the trigger is very minimal to engage the hammer. So again, now what we have is we have a double action, single action weapon system. After the hammer's to the rear and you're done firing, you'll want to safety the weapon system, so you're going to want to decock it and put it back into double action mode, because that is the way the manufacturer intended this weapon system to be carried. So from here, I'm going to decock. Now, it is going to be your choice after you decock, and you'll notice that the hammer actually went forward. That is safe because it's rolling the firing pin out of the way. One of the things that you don't want to do with these type of weapon systems is actually ride the hammer forward, because the gun is still set up and prepared to fire. So on a double single gun, you want to use that decocker. I think that's extremely important. As far as the safety goes on this weapon system, you'll notice that once I decocked it, some people will carry it in this condition, and then other people will flip that safety up and off, so that all they have to do is pull the gun out and start firing. But just understand that with this weapon system, as compared to the other two types that I just showed you, you actually now have to cock it, fire it, then it goes into single action, and the difference in triggers are substantial. Not only that, but you have to remember under stress to decock it and then flip your safety up and off. Anything that's external to the gun, when you're manipulating the weapon system, the safety can go on. So there are a lot of different things to think about with this weapon system. It's good, it's accurate, it's reliable, but if you listen to the segment, it's much longer to explain this weapon system than it is the other. So under stress, we generally find that this system is a lot more complicated to work for the average person under stress.
I'm already confused just listening.
I'm sure you are.
But we're finding a lot more military and law enforcement units that we're out training are actually carrying off safe to eliminate one of those excessive waste movements, and then you're getting basically a double action only pull and not have to worry about engaging a safety under dynamic critical stress, which is obviously a very huge deal.
The big thing that we generally find too is under stress, once the gun comes out and they run a few rounds out of it, the problem is now understanding that you have one more step to do, which isn't just put the gun away into your holster, which is what you generally want to do because you're generally trying to do something else, whether it's move a loved one out of the way, whether it's grab somebody, move from point A to point B, or actually just holster up and throw your shirt back over it so you don't end up getting shot by possibly an off-duty cop if you did make a good defensive shoot out in public. Not to say that you need a race to the holster, but the point being is most people just put the gun back in their holster with that hammer back, and then it's more susceptible of going off. All right, the last weapon system that we're going to talk about is the revolver. This is a double action weapon system, and what you'll notice is when you pull the trigger on this particular gun, the hammer falls forward each and every shot. Now you can manually cock the hammer back on this weapon system and fire it, but you'll notice it won't reset like it will on the semi-autos. So that's why this is a double action gun. Traditional, what you'll find is a lot of people that that may not have a lot of experience on weapon systems, or because of your lifestyle you choose to carry something that isn't too complicated. Even some of the other ones in the concealment portion that we're going to cover, you'll notice won't even have hammers on them, so it'll be a strictly double action pull each and every time. These are generally the types of guns that you're going to see either in classes or in the law enforcement community. They're simple, they're easy to use.
Okay, let's talk about different sighting systems on handguns. Lots of different types of sights out there. We want to try to break it down in a priority sense. What is your priority as a shooter in any situation or scenario that you may find yourself in? Whether you're a competitive shooter, home defense, you're out there chasing down a active shooter at 50 to 75 yards, you may have to take that single shot. So will that sight that you have on your weapon system right now work for you in any given situation? So that's what we kind of look for when we're choosing a pair of sights. We've got competitive sights, adjustables, you've got blacked out sights, night sights, double white dots, big dot type sights, fiber optics. But what I like to do again is break it down in a priority sense. What is going to work for you in a time is life situation, because that's what we're talking about here, particularly in this class, is time is life, dynamic stress. Yeah, I've got competitive sights, but we'll talk about that in a second, how the competitive market has kind of played into the tactical market as well. What I like to find in a sight is something that works for me instinctively, as I'm instinctively or intuitively shooting, which is what happens naturally under stress to our bodies. The natural body mechanics of the eyes, the way they work with the blood flow to the center visual acuity. It is impossible for you to acquire a little tiny sight, and this is kind of where the controversy comes in, because all our lives we've been taught clear front sight, clear front sight, clear front sight, press the trigger to the rear, clear front sight. Well, that goes against everything our body does naturally under stress. So that's the issue here. Now, if you pick up a psychology book, you pick up a book on how the mind works, you'll understand more of why that concept falls more into play there with the sighting systems. So again, what I like to find is something on the front sight that is very thin, that gives me accuracy at distance, because my mind will eventually switch over at a certain range, and every one of us have a different range. And I know mine is around the 15-yard line mark, where my brain kicks in and says, I am uncomfortable to take this shot instinctively or intuitively. Now, I know I can get combat accurate hits in the time that I need to in a certain amount of time in that particular scenario out to that range. Beyond that is when my mind clicks in and says, I need accuracy for the shot. I feel uncomfortable taking this shot. So that's when I need my front sight to work for me. And my front sight being typically a fiber optic type of sight, where a lot of people go, whoa, that's a competitive sight. That thing can break. Well, guess what you still have there if it does break? You got a big black box. So now you go back to your black on black square front sight. In that case, that may happen. So again, reiterating on the priority sense, my priority is accuracy. If I have to take a shot on an active shooter or down a hallway in a house that's typically a little bit longer, 20 yards maybe, I need accuracy. That's my priority. Up close and personal inside that range, I don't need that, because more it's going to be instinctive shooting. When a body alarm reaction kicks in and your eyes go into defensive mode, you will not be able to acquire a big dot type system. So it's kind of useless, because I see a lot of big dot type systems out there, and then when you get on the range and we put you under stress at 25 to 35 yards, which yes, you may have to take that shot. Sometimes maybe you're in a mall or a school, you're a police officer trying to take a shot on an active hyper killer trying to kill a bunch of kids, and you are the one at that particular time that has to make that difference. Well, your sighting system better work at that time, and that's where I find, going back to the smaller front sight. The rear sights, what I like to find on a rear sight, something simple. For me, being more of a combat style shooter, I like something that's going to work with me in any situation or scenario I find myself in. I like a blacked out rear sight because it does match up good with the fiber fronts, and probably get into night sights here in a second. But as far as the cuts on the rear, you're starting to see a lot more defensive style rear sights, meaning that you can manipulate this weapon system if you had to at any given time with the rear sight. You can use it on your clothing, on your holster. It'll manipulate it if you're shot or injured, or you're only one-handed, you're carrying something else or somebody. So I like to find that in a sight too. You'll see a lot of different sights out there that are sloped, and then you got to end up using this small portion on the ejection port to manipulate the slide or the operation, the battery of the weapon. And so I like to have something big, distinctive, that's going to work every single time, and I know it through consistency and training. So I definitely look for that in a sight.
I think the important thing is to understand that what is your mission? It kind of goes back to what Travis talked about earlier. You know, if you're a competitive shooter and you're running one of these style weapon systems, you know, my focus then is going to be probably more of an adjustable sight where I can zero this weapon system out at maybe even 50 yards. I can take this gun here, and the way the sights are cut on the rear, the way the fiber optic front is being extremely small, I can make precision shots. I can even do body shots with this gun at 100 yards. But when you look at the adjustability and the vulnerability of this rear sight, even though it's built really well to take a little bit of abuse, you'll notice that you can push down on these things. I'm not going to utilize this for the combat side of the house or the defensive side of the house because of its nature, because of its adjustability, because I know I may have to chamber, just like Travis said earlier. So again, what exactly are you buying your sights for? What weapon system are you putting them on? I think is extremely important. As you saw with Travis's system right here, this deep cut allows that. It allows you to do more aggressive things with this gun and not sacrifice either the inability to cycle the gun, or you'll end up ripping your sight off. Where you'll notice on this has got a slight curvature, but I will tell you that is not enough right here to actually catch on a holster or any type of hard object. So going more aggressive, but carrying it for that purpose, what it's built for, is important as well. The next thing that we're going to talk about is night sights. A couple different factors that you need to think about. That is, at least go with obviously a dot front, because that's what you're trying to focus on. You can run a blank slate on the rear. Sometimes under stress though, if you don't have enough light on the object that you're trying to shoot, then you'll have a hard time indexing your rear sight, having more of a soft focus on the rear sight. I think the most important thing when looking at the night sight side of the house is that if you run front and rear, there are a couple different ways they go. You have a traditional 3-dot, which means that you have to align obviously 3 dots in a row to get a good accurate shot. The most important thing is make sure that the rear sight color is not the same as the front sight, because under stress I've seen shooters actually put their front sight slightly over to the left and then line up the rear and then wonder why their shots are not even on the target. So if you are going to make a purchase, generally some of the good manufacturers now will have a green front as an example and a yellow rear, or slightly brighter front, slightly dim rear, same color. See, again, that can be confused under stress. So going with more of a yellow rear and a green front, having more of a hard focus on that is a great way to go. Now, some manufacturers, and I generally will prefer these over running a 3-dot, is where they have a dot on the front sight and a dot rear sight. And when you run with that style of configuration, intuitively you're driving the gun out, and then all you need to worry about is putting a dot over a dot, which seems to be a little bit more simplified, if you would call it, on running night sights. If that's what you choose to do, you really are hard set on running a good set of night sights, I think simpler is better.
Let's talk about that purchase of that night sights. You know, say you don't have the money to buy night sights. Maybe you just got your stock gun and you spent a lot of money on it. So where does the controversy come in there? Controversy as far as night sights and needing them or not needing them. Yeah, there's times where they will help you index your sight in a low light situation. However, when you employ a flashlight into that situation, your night sights pretty much go away anyways. So think about that. What I'm saying is don't rely 100% on night sights. If you're running a stock set of sights or stock box sights, you can get away with it, but obviously we always want to carry a light with us as well, which we'll talk about later.
So as far as night sights go, they do provide you some ability, but I think what Travis was saying is that if you don't have night sights, you still can be a force multiplier. You still can do certain things as long as you end up having some type of illumination.
Absolutely. Let's talk about height over bore. Some of you guys that are familiar with carbine operation, you understand that there's a height over bore ratio with the sights. So very important thing for me, and I know Chris as well, and every shooter should think about this, is a height over bore relation with the gun. When you choose a weapon system, you'll find that some of them out there, like this Smith & Wesson M&P or even a Glock, for instance, are some of the better height over bore relation guns that I've ever used. What I'm talking about with height over bore is the height of the sights, the top of the blade of the sights compared or in relation to the barrel. Okay, so here we have minimal offset to that barrel. Some guns you'll find out there have a very high sight over bore ratio, or even not even to the bore, but actually to the bones of the wrist. Some of these guns are built to be in line with the body's ergonomics and help you get a better recoil control, to have a better rigid abutment for that slide to recoil against. And that's what we want. We want the gun as low in the hand as possible. That's why we like to have beaver tail guns like 1911s, which make that real high tang grip, which bring that sight, that bore, and in line with the wrist ratio there. So that's going to help you maintain control in a recoil situation, or getting a faster sight alignment, sight picture on the target, because those sights are more in line with the bones. Where some guns you'll come up and you'll have to adjust because they sit so high above the wrist line or the bore line. So be careful when you're choosing that in a weapon system.
I think the most important thing is understanding that in regards to the slide, I want to try to keep the distance from the frame as minimal as possible. And primarily what we're looking at is this is all mass. This thing moves back and forth. So the heavier this is, the more mass you have, the higher it is off the gun. You have more mass coming back. It takes it longer to cycle. So in regards to a lot of different weapon systems that are out there, you want to try to be able to get your hands as high up on the bore as possible. So you're hoping that the frame of the weapon doesn't prevent that. And then you're hoping that that standoff between the slide and the frame is very, very minimal. Like the Smith & Wesson M&Ps, even 1911s, you can get extremely high on them the way they're designed. So those are some good things that you want to look at.
We want to control that path of least resistance. When this gun recoils in my hand and I have a good symmetric 100% grip on each side of this gun, that gun's going to recoil up if I did not have a high tang grip. So by having that height over bore issue lower and a higher tang grip, we're going to have more control of that path of least resistance. Not only going up, but some guns that recoil heavy upward and then come back down, all that mass on top of your hand being a high sight ratio, maybe there's a lot more metal like the big guns you're talking about, it will dive down. So we're going to have a harder time reacquiring for that follow-up shot. So very important thing is to really think about your selection and your handguns where it fits not only your eyes, your hands, but also how your body mechanics work with that gun.
What you'll find is when you start going to, being a collector is one thing. You collect a lot of different firearms. There's many out there. A lot of them are more aesthetically pleasing. Some of them don't even really shoot that great. They're just cool to have and cool to look at. But when it comes down to throwing one on you to carry defensively, concealed or open, be it a law enforcement officer, if you have the choice, because some departments you can actually choose your weapon system. These are different things that you need to think about. In a perfect world, I can tell you that generally I have two go-to guns that I will use 95% of the time because they work 95% of the time, because they allow me rapid engagement 95% of the time. They're simplistic in nature, they're durable, they're rugged. Those are like my go-to guns. The rest are guns that just stay in my safe or are hanging on my wall that are great, but there's no real practicality purpose in regards to actually utilizing that to run it.
And that's a question that we get a lot. Well, what kind of guns do you guys use? Well, again, we have those two go-to guns. We don't, we're not going to go out there on the market and just pick up any gun and use it. Now, possibly some of them we might, but our choice of handguns is more of a striker fire, safe action type of pistol, and then obviously a 1911. I'm a big 1911 shooter. I've been shooting 1911s all my life in my job. And that's the gun that I'm going to use for a direct action type of mission, where if I'm doing high risk entry or an assault on a building and overseas or something, that's what I choose, because it is a NASCAR of guns. It is a high performance machine. You got to fill it with premium. You got to do maintenance on the thing. So with that in mind, if somebody told me, hey Trav, you got to go into this room and possibly get into a defensive situation, there's a one of these types of weapon systems, a striker fire sitting there. It's been used, about 5,000 rounds through it, and then there's a brand new custom 1911 there on the table that's clean and ready to go. I would probably grab for the Toyota of guns before I grab for that NASCAR, because I don't know who built it. It's a custom type of weapon system. I don't know what kind of triggers in it. I don't know what kind of sights are on it right away. I don't know if the backstrap is fit for my hand. So it's more of a custom gun. Now you're getting guns out of the factories that are custom, semi-custom 1911 platforms, but you're going to find you're still going to want to modify. You're still going to want to make it fit you a little bit better.
And then generally they run a little finicky. Not all ammo feeds through those guns.
Yeah.
They have to be ammo specific. Whereas most of the weapon systems like Travis was talking about, like the Smith & Wesson M&P, I can load it, pick it up, fire it, put it back down, get it dirty, get it sandy. It does not matter what's going to happen with that gun. Some of the tolerances on some of these other guns, even though they're $3,000 to $4,000, you would think like, oh my God, $4,000, that thing's going to run in any condition. Not necessarily. A little bit of sand could impede the weapon system and function. Whereas a lot of these others are more combat style guns.
Yeah. So we just look at it in a priority sense. I don't know who built that. I know mine. I know if I have mine sitting on the table, I know what I'm going to grab. However, just something to think about there, food for thought. All right, let's talk about grip texturing and grip reduction. Kind of in line what I talked about earlier with the height over bore. Some people will run this configuration of gun and it still doesn't fit their hands correctly, especially like for me, for instance, if I'm running back and forth between a 1911 platform and a striker fire system, like the Smith & Wesson or the Glock. It helps me if I reduce the backs down a little bit to where it makes it more consistent with my 1911 grip. It also helps me get a little bit higher on the gun, so it helps correct that height over bore issue as well.
I think the important thing is to understand is that, if you're running a plastic gun, anything that's generally plastic, we like aggressive grips on it, because as you're firing that thing and you're hot, sweaty, or bloody, that thing starts moving in your hand. When it starts moving in your hand, it starts causing inconsistencies. So the first thing that you can look at is just merely texture in a gun. Now, understand this. You can do it yourself, like Travis has done his texture and job himself. But he's also taken the responsibility that if he messes up this gun, he's not going to send it back to Glock and they're not going to give him a new one. He's going to end up having to go out and purchase another gun. If you are going to do it yourself, you better understand what you are specifically doing to your gun, how far you can penetrate that plastic, because if you don't, they're not going to be sending you a replacement. Let's talk about a couple key things, key locations that Travis has done on his gun that you guys can look at right here. First, he's got obviously a very aggressive texture. This is more of a weapon system that he's not going to conceal. So as far as going real aggressive, it's a smart move on his part. Also, the forward portion right in here.
Thank you.
Honestly, it was great. Not only that, but as you get on the weapon system, you'll notice we ride a thumbs forward position, and I just merely have contact with a little bit of grit right here. What I'll find is doing this area is really helpful, because sometimes if you leave this area slick, your thumb ends up slipping, and before you know it, you're into a crappy grip on the weapon system.
And it's not the squeeze, it's just the texture. It's just enough friction possibly to keep, it'll work.
Keep your thumb on contact.
It's value added, so why not?
Now he will also undercut slightly on the trigger guard right here, and that is so that the reaction hand can index and almost fit into a groove. Kind of surprising the manufacturers haven't put more of a generic groove in there to help facilitate and allow that. But again, this is just a do-it-yourself texture job. Notice up front, again, on this weapon system, it's textured up there. On this, it's undercut up underneath the trigger, helps you get, again, a higher grip on the gun so that you can manage recoil and control it a lot better. I mean, technically, if you could put your hand right here, that's the perfect world, but you can't because it impedes the function of the weapon system. So by doing grip reductions on the gun, it allows your hand to get in there. You'll notice down here on the bottom, just a texturing, a medium, and a more aggressive reduction on the system depending upon how your hands are. So undercutting up here on the beaver tail is really important. Shaping the gun's really important. These are big benefits to plastic style weapon systems. Now on, say, this Smith & Wesson M&P, you're not going to be able to reduce this grip. Actually, the grip on the M&P is quite ergonomical in your hand as far as the placement goes. So what he's doing here now is just merely a texture job. So
well, the M&P
again,
comes with different back straps anyways, which is really good. So it's pretty much all you have to do is select the back strap that fits your hand and then texture it.
Exactly. And you'll notice good clean lines. And again, when you start firing these guns, there's a huge difference. A lot of times when we hand our guns to shooters that have slick weapon systems or just a little bit of skater tape on it, and then they realize how much better they can hold on to the gun and control the gun when they're firing, that's where it really pays off. So it's not just a matter of aesthetics. It goes back to what Travis said earlier, which is, first of all, fitting your hand to the weapon platform so you can be as high up on the gun as possible. For those of you running between Glocks and 1911 style guns, it starts to bridge that gap a little bit better. If you're in a sweaty, bloody, aggressive environment, it just gives you more to hold on to, which is extremely important.
Yeah, and if you can't, as far as texture goes, if you can't stipple your gun, say it's a department gun or a military gun that you're using, grip tape's a good option. Like 1911 sometimes don't come with serrations on the front strap. I have to have texture on the front strap because that is probably, I don't know the whole 60, 40, 100% grip thing because I don't know what my hand's doing under stress, but I know that portion of my hand is huge when it comes to control on the gun. So I have to have control here. So grip tape's always a really good option as well. You can see like on this 1911, there's even grip tape on the side for that reference point for the thumb. So you can do that. There's companies out there that make grip tape packages for these type of weapon systems here. But if you can stipple it and it's your personal gun, you can get away with that, then go ahead. This is my personal M&P here that I stipple myself, but I've been doing this for a long time and I've learned through definitely trial and error. And just be careful, like Chris said, if you're going to take it upon yourself to do that.
That's really it on grip reductions. All right, so we've talked about large frame guns. Now let's move on to something slightly different, obviously concealment style weapons. I classify them as medium frame to small frame weapon systems. Couple factors. First, obviously lifestyle, like Travis said, is going to play a huge part in the type of weapon system that you actually carry. Some of the weapon systems, dependent upon your clothing that you do choose, if you're in a hot climate, you might have to wear shorts, or that might be what you wear most of the time. And you might end up going with a pocket gun. Couple things to think about when running a gun this small. It's better to at least have a weapon on you, but can you really run it and can you really control it? For some people, hand size is another factor. Some people have such large hands that even though this would be a great weapon system for them to carry, their hands are just too large to really operate it. Also, as you are employing this weapon system, generally we run a thumbs forward position. As you can see, if I tried to run a thumbs forward position on this, I'd end up charring off my thumb, if not shooting it off. And I have just regular hands. So you might end up having to dump this thing down to get it out of the way. So for me, this wouldn't be a weapon system that I would choose, but maybe to a narcotics officer who doesn't have many options.
That's a backup
That
gun.
would be a good backup gun.
That's not a concealed carry gun. That's something that you go as a last resort because, you know, and I like to choose a gun that I can employ at 50 yards if I need to, and that's my carry gun. That's my concealment gun. I don't feel comfortable doing that in that capacity, so that's where I would carry it in that other capacity.
I mean, I know I don't. I definitely know I don't. I know some people carry it as a primary weapon system, but I think you need to just consider what Travis is saying. What is your ability to perform with that particular weapon system? Triggers obviously play a big part. We're back to a revolver again, so we're running a double action. You also have the ability on this particular revolver to thumb cock it and put it into more of a single action to get a little bit more accurate shot. This is a 357 Magnum, so distance-wise and ballistics-wise, you're definitely going to get a little bit better result out of this weapon system and distance, even though it is a smaller barrel. So it might be that happy medium of kind of finding what works best for you. Now, when you go over to something like this, one of these little 38s, this is what they refer to, this is a Smith & Wesson Airweight. It's very, very light. Now, some of the controllability, because of the weight factor, like this weighs a lot, So therefore the recoil doesn't seem as bad. When you start shooting defensive ammunition out of a frame like this, being an air weight, it's going to be more noticeable in recoil, and that's something that you need to consider as well. However, this thing is so light that you're going to take it with you everywhere. You're going to always want to have it on you because it's not going to feel like it's on you. And I think that's where it comes into play of utilizing a weapon system that's small, that you are going to carry every single day. Now, this weapon system might be great up in the mountains, or if I'm hiking or something like that, where maybe it's not a defensive situation in regards to another person attacking me, but maybe even an animal of some sort. Now you start getting into these little revolvers, and your sight pictures really are drastically affected because they are so small. So for this particular weapon system, this one actually has a red dot laser on it, and that is to help you see at night or in low light conditions, which can actually aid you. In broad daylight, it is pretty much going to be more intuitive as you drive out with this weapon system, and then hopefully you've established good fundamentals.
And talking about that weight a little bit more, what I like to do is I like to carry an air weight or an air weight like that Smith & Wesson air weight there. This is actually my gun. So I'll carry this gun with a .357 Magnum in it, but I've trained to this weight. I know what it's going to do. I know the recoil, and I'm very consistent and proficient with it. But you got to keep that in mind. If that's a little bit too much gun for you, and you'd rather just carry it because it's convenient because of the weight, then you got to find a happy medium there. You got to find a balance. So keep that in consideration.
This one's an air light, and it's slightly different where it's double action, but you can also thumb cock the hammer. There are no laser grips on this one. Those are generally added features if you choose to utilize them. You'll also notice that it runs a fixed sight. So as far as the rear sight goes, there's no adjustability there. What you get is what you get. So hopefully from the manufacturer, the sights are pretty on, and that's going to be the difference in quality and the money that you spend. You could spend $200 on a revolver, and then you wonder why it doesn't work after you fired a few hundred rounds through it. Or you might wonder why this Smith & Wesson costs $800, but you can go out, you can shoot it, you can run it, you can practice with it, and it works every time. So there are obviously a lot of factors that play into small frame guns. Now you start getting into a weapon system like this. This is a Smith & Wesson M&P 45, and it's a little bit bigger. I would more classify this as a medium frame weapon system, but this is that weapon system that Travis is talking about, where I feel confident in making a possible 50-yard shot to either suppress, if not neutralize. I would feel more comfortable, I know Travis feels more comfortable carrying a weapon system like this, because if that worst case scenario happens, I don't want to go, you know what, I wish I could do something, I wish I could possibly help out in this situation or protect my family, especially if it's my family on the line, and then realize that I really don't have enough gun to do it.
You don't have that much of a consistency issue going back and forth between a medium-sized frame to your full frame that we're normally used to running the standard M&P 9 and then running to this. So I feel very confident with that consistency-wise. You get into a little bit smaller frame like the smaller M&P series, the compact. You know, this is a great gun. I can work this gun pretty good. It's still pretty consistent. It's built kind of the same, but it's still, I have that confidence issue, that consistency issue out at a very far range. So I want to make sure I'm using this in the right capacity. Probably more of a backup system at this point.
Thanks. One of the things that you'll notice with subcompacts like this, and it's that trade-off. If you notice, without the magazine in it, my little finger right here hangs off the gun. It makes it a little challenging when you go to do a speed reload on this weapon system, and as you insert the magazine, a lot of times you also insert a little bit of flesh, and that can become a problem as well. But with this one, I think this one's, I forget how many rounds, I know it's over 10, so I at least have 10 rounds of 9mm. You'll be surprised. Some of these in comparison, this weapon system right here, this thing's going to recoil more than this. Sometimes as you go smaller, it will actually, as far as follow-up shots, you're going to feel more recoil in that weapon system. Definitely, even though this weapon system right here is a 380 and this one's a 9mm, and you would normally think that being a 380 is probably going to have less recoil, being in such a small, lightweight framed weapon system, it's actually going to jump in your hands a lot more, especially if you carry defensive ammunition.
This little Kel-Tec here kicks more than my J-frame 357 to me.
And
it's uncontrollable because of the size and the weight.
And then that means it's not going in.
That's
in
that balance.
Your holster.
That's that balance I found. That's not it. What would you rather carry? I mean, this gun that is lightweight. It holds I don't even know how many rounds it holds, 6 or 8 rounds. Or carry this thing that can carry that much more rounds, that is more consistent to what you're used to shooting. So I'd rather go with the latter.
On a lot of manufacturers, there's little knurls, like for instance on this Glock, we have a little speed plate on the bottom of this Glock that we've designed, and it allows your fingers to actually wrap the bottom of it. That way you get a little bit more bite on the gun. Now, of course, on a reload, you still have to get that little finger out of the way, but when you're getting on the gun in regards to a grip, it allows you to maintain a better grip and better control of that weapon system. So there are always little things, obviously accessories, that you can put on these weapon systems to make it a little bit more bearable for you. When you're dealing with, say, Glock and the M&P line, for instance, on this 9mm M&P, this one's a 9mm. If I'm carrying my full-size 9mm, on an emergency, I could utilize those full-size mags for this gun as well. So if I was a cop carrying this as a backup to my, in a sense, primary weapon, which would be a full-size, I could immediately still utilize
grab a couple of full-size mags, keep
the
them
mags on my belt
keep them
that
in the
I'm already carrying.
Or the glove compartment, have
Yeah.
some extra ones in there if you're running concealed. Let's talk about the 1911s.
This one's a Kimber lightweight frame. Generally, if you build this all out of steel, of course, it's going to help and aid in the recoil, but then again, the weight factor plays another issue. So I might have to understand that this thing's going to recoil a little bit more, but again, if I carry it every single day, then that's the benefit, especially in a time as life situation when I need to count on this thing. I'm wearing it. It's not still in the car. I think that's the thing. Some people don't take it as serious, and it's like, hey, I'm just going to run into the store for a second, so I'll just leave it in the car, and then all of a sudden, when you're getting your Slurpee and somebody's robbing the place, you really wish at that point you'd brought it in with you. They're lightweight. Obviously a big boy caliber. Again, thumbs, got to be very careful. Mine stopped just short of the muzzle. If you end up getting a, if you're the type of person where body-wise, physique-wise, you can hide. I knew guys that their concealable guns are full-size 45s, but I can tell you they generally will have a bigger frame than me,
right,
and they can conceal it without printing, which is obviously extremely important.
Or we'll dress to the gun, which is what I like to do. And I'm a big 1911 fan, but I won't find myself running this type of platform. Even though it's a great race car class, high performance gun of all these categories out here, it still doesn't fit my category. It doesn't fit my preferences, my consistency to what I would want out there on the streets.
All right, this last weapon system that I'll grab is kind of a unique one. It is very, very small. I generally, and it's probably the wrong terminology, I end up calling these like gut guns. You know what I mean? Really, because I'm not going to sit here and try to take more than a 7-yard shot with this thing. Hopefully, on this weapon system, the only thing that I can do is thumb cock the hammer. That's how this one operates. You'll notice there is no safeties here. There's nothing that protects that trigger. The only thing that protects you from the gun going off is the fact that if you pull the trigger, it won't go off until you cock the hammer. You have to be very, very careful when operating a weapon system like this. For some people though, this is all they carry. Hopefully your engagements are only 7 yards or less, and 7 yards is really pushing it. Just remember, there's a huge variety. These are some of the weapon systems that are either ours or some of the industry partners provided for us. There are many out there. I take concealment guns, and so does Travis, as there are many different types out there. The most important thing on a concealment gun, you're generally carrying it on you, thus the word concealment. So you better damn well make sure that that gun is going to run and perform, because the likelihood of you using this in a defensive situation is much greater than just a fun gun that's a large frame gun that you don't really carry on you, but you just shoot at the range. Those are two entirely different things. I'm more likely to employ a medium to small frame gun under dynamic stress while I'm at the mall than I am a large frame gun. I'm gonna take my time picking out a small frame gun or a medium frame gun that I'm gonna run on me concealed because of the importance in knowing that chances are for me employing it, I want to make sure I can hit those other factors that Travis talked about. Consistency, being able to still manipulate that weapon system, getting a performance out of the gun that I need in a time as life situation. So those are the important factors, but those are the important factors to us. Again, we're not absolute about anything, so what you choose is up to you, but the only thing that we can stress is making sure that it's consistent to your large frame, and then not only is it consistent to your large frame, but it's something that you are going to carry on you.
Well, like I talked about in the class, you know, there's that concealed carry lifestyle that you have to understand first before you even start going here. So before you start picking up a gun, find out, learn, educate yourself about the lifestyle, and do it right if you're going to do it. Don't be a liability to society. Be an asset to it, like I said. So that is huge right here. This is step one, finding the right gun for you. Don't be lazy because you want to carry something lightweight or something that looks cool. Do it right.
Carry something practical.
Practical, yeah.
Let's move on to really quickly suppressors. This is Advanced Armament's new suppressor. This thing's the bomb right here. It's very light. Nevertheless, I actually will utilize a suppressor on my home defense gun. One is, if I got to start running that gun in my house, I don't need to blow my ears. I think a lot of people look at suppressors as it's the James Bond, it's the assassin side of the house. A lot more agencies are starting to realize that not only on their rifles, but even on handguns for limited things, you can save people's hearing and the communication can be really good. I use it in my house with subsonic ammunition, mainly because I want to be able to hear in case my children are moving from one room to another, or if there is another threat in another location, I want to be able to pick up on those things. Obviously, if the bad guy pulls his gun out first and starts firing, then it's going to be really loud. But I can tell you at my end of the gun, it's not going to be loud. So that's why and again, you set it up for yourself, like to run a suppressor and run suppressed inside my house. Now,
Well, I do too, because if I'm safeguarding my family in a corner and there's an intruder in my house, now I can safeguard their hearing as well a little bit better. So
I had mentioned subsonic ammunition. Now that's what I shoot out of this, so it's a little quieter. But that brings us to ammunition. You're going to see that there are a ton of different types of ammo out on the market. I look at it as a couple different ways. You've got your homegrown ammo. That's you buying casings and primers and powder, coming up with the ultimate amazing combination. We're not going to get into ballistics. What we're going to look at is saying, hey, you know, there are guys that reload and fire those things off, okay? There are guys that, in companies that sell reloaded, remanufactured ammunition. And then there are just regular, say, full metal jacket, companies are producing the ammo. I would utilize it more as training. It is not classified as defensive ammo, but it is produced by a major manufacturer. Regardless of all of that, the first thing you need to do with any type of ammunition, especially defensive ammunition, is make sure that it runs through your gun. Now here's the problem that you have. A lot of people will, because of the price, because this box, hypothetically, I don't know what Hornady charges. All that I'm saying is generally for 20 rounds of defensive ammunition, what you'll find is the box of ammo is $30, if not even more in some cases, depending upon what type of ammo you're buying. So what you typically end up doing is you grab the cheap stuff, run that through for training, and then you go out and you buy some really good defensive ammunition, but you don't test it. Because why? It's so expensive. And then you don't realize that it won't function through your gun. I can tell you that I know.
So you're saying you have to bite the bullet.
You don't want to bite the bullet on that case. I will tell you that what you'll find is even some guns will give light primer strikes. So for some guns, it won't even go off. For other manufacturers of firearms, what will end up happening is you'll have cycling problems. The gun will have a failure to feed or failure to go in a battery, or it'll cause a double feed. I know that specific 1911 manufacturers will give you a list of the type of ammo that is only to run through their gun because they've built it a certain way, and there are only certain manufacturers that are building it to a certain specification. So the biggest thing with ammo, most people know it, no defensive ammunition as a hollow point. You're going to have to do some research, and it's going to be a lot of research to find out what works best for you. I say talk to a variety of either industry guys or gun dealers, and generally most of them have some general knowledge on what type of ammunition might work better. I just know that I'll run ball if I have to, as long as I know it works, because that's the most important thing. At the end of the day, there is no magic bullet, okay? There's no bullet on this table that's gonna pick a man up and send him back 5 feet, okay? That's not going to happen. Bullets hit things. As you saw, in parts of the video, we shot through glass. Some of the rounds, are gonna get deflected. Anytime that round is leaving that muzzle and it's in flight and it hits something other than just pure flesh, there's a good chance that there's going to be something that ends up happening on that, which means it could be ineffective. So your ability to run the gun is more important. Again, just make sure that the ammo that you choose works best for you.
Well, Chris has got a good point on price. It's going to cost money. All this stuff on this table is going to cost money. But you know what? This is what I consider life support equipment. This is like a parachute to me. This thing better work. Under that critical stress situation, it better work for me. And that's why we take so much pride in caution and really stress, do it right. So if you're going to go concealed, understand the lifestyle, understand all the different weapons, the gear out there that's going to help you be better success and build your survivability rate, and that's the way to go. Let's move on to lights. All right, lights are a pretty important factor for me when I'm carrying a handgun, and I've got all this other gear selection all worked out. This light, again, for me, I know for Chris, is just as important to carrying the gun and the holster. I like to have a good, solid lighting system out there because probably most of the time, statistics speaking, incidents typically happen in low light situations. And I think it's just always good practice to have a flashlight on you anyways. So looking at all these different lights here, my general thing is I like to have a weapons mounted light. So when I'm working with a weapon, I pull it out, the light's already there for me, and it's working. I'm not having multiple things, because what if I have my kid in my hand and it's in a low light situation? That's what I like to have. So I like to choose a weapons mounted light.
They definitely got to be robust, and they definitely have to be durable, because generally most of these weapon lights hang right in front of the muzzle, and that's where that's where the blast comes from. So if you don't have a really good light, I can tell you that these lights are over $100. But I can tell you the hundreds of thousands of rounds that we run out of our handguns, or run those things on our rifles off to the side, they're extremely durable, and they're very, very bright. And Travis just picked up one of the newer models that Surefire's making, which is a X400, and it has a light laser combination, which is pretty unique. I actually run one of these on my rifle, but it is primarily designed as a handgun light.
Yeah, it's pretty good. You got to find a holster that obviously fits it though, so think about that if you're going to choose this system. Pretty practical, especially this is my home defense light here. This is what I use, because if I leave town, my wife's got it. She can protect the family when I'm gone. So, and it's a little bit easier for her, especially in the profession she has. She doesn't have the time to come out and be as professional of a shooter. So if that laser helps her in that situation, then that's great. All right, when you're choosing a handheld light, I like to find something that's a little bit compact. These executive series lights from Surefire, the E2D and the E2D LED Defender series are awesome lights. I've carried these for a long time, especially since the new LED version came out. All right, so looking at that difference between the incandescent and the LED, you can see the more brighter colors of light. The light spectrums are a lot different here. It's going to hurt somebody's eyes a little bit more, and you can carry it and run it longer, and it's going to last longer. Like Chris said, you see what these go through on our carbines and our handguns, and that's what I want to try to find in even a handheld light. So typically, if I'm carrying a handgun and I've got a weapons mounted light on it, I'm going to have one of these in my pocket as well, because to me, 2 is 1 and 1 is none. That's what I've always lived by, and even though these are awesome lights, I have seen them go down. Batteries go dead, just like this one's getting a little low, so it's time to change it. But hey, maybe it got turned on in your pocket. That's something else to think about. If you're going to pick a light, make sure it's got a protected bezel. That's why I like the Executive series. So keep that in mind. This is the newest LX2 from Surefire. This thing is phenomenal. This is a light that I've always wanted. And the reason being is because it fits in that Executive series type light. It's got a reverse clip on it now. You can clip it from either direction, because I know that was a huge requirement, even for me, either running it downward or turning it around and run it the other way. The clip works both ways, so you don't have to reverse it or anything. The other great thing I like about this is power. There's all kinds of lights out there that have great powers, but this thing goes all the way to 200 lumens in this small package and still gives you phenomenal runtime. So that's what I like to see there. The other thing that I like about this thing is it goes to low power first, then it goes to high power. Now, I'm very finicky about multi-function switches on lights. I've seen lights out there that you've got 4 or 5 different switches on, and you've got to be careful with those, because if you pull it out and you've got the wrong function on, that's a bad day. So the great thing I like about this, again, is it goes low power first, which is great for searching and daily use. I'm not burning my runtime down, but if I get under stress, what is typically going to happen? I'm going to press it all the way, and that's going to give me that full 200 lumens of power that I need in that critical stress situation. So awesome product, probably the best thing they could come out with, and it fits great on the primary weapon system too, like carbines, because again, you get that low to high that you want.
One of the other great things about the Surefire weapon lights is that they can also be used as tools, as strike tools for self-defense. I mean, a lot of them have some bezel striking ability on them. So there's a little bit more that can come into play with those lights in a defensive role. Like Travis said earlier, with the LX2, one of the benefits is you start throwing that light into somebody's eyes, and you are really going to start having a positive effect over them and disorientate them just with a light. So even in a possible hand-to-hand confrontation, if you can get that light in their face, and you know, a lot of people play around with these things now. These things are getting so bright you can't even play with one another. In the old days, you used to do that. Hey, look here for a sec, boom, and hit them with the light. And now you'll start to mess somebody's eyes up with those.
Well, you know, here's a good example. Is my wife always used to carry mace, especially when I first met her. I couldn't stand it, because mace is probably one of the most improperly employed things out there. Some of them are getting better with the switches and the caps, but most of the women out there, they carry a little thing of mace, and it's got a leather case, it's got a snap, it's got a safety, and then you got to push a button. So for somebody to pull that out of their purse or out of their pocket and get all those functions done under stress is almost impossible. When they now, like my wife carries nothing but these types of lights, and so she pulls that thing out when she sees a bad problem about to start, and she can say, you know, get back. First of all, you got this lady now pointing a flashlight at you, which would probably be an automatic deterrent for most people. Like, you know, if you have a predator, you know, you have a predator presence, you're trying to pursue a female, or even a man, even in a law enforcement capacity, they're going to be like, why are they shining a light at me? Okay, and you've now turned from a soft target to a hard target just because of a light, and that's a great tool. And then on top of that, what typically is going to happen if that predator continues to pursue that female? She's got the light in the face. Typically people are going to be blinded, especially with this 200 lumen light, and when they do come in striking range, they're blind and they're getting striked. So that's a great tool feature, like Chris was saying.
You start getting into these more, say, custom lights. This is a M3T combat light. First of all, you can utilize it and actually squeeze this thing with a weapon system. Now, of course, trying to run a traditional Roger Surefire grip on here, your muzzle is going to be extremely close to the end of this thing. I look at this light for one really good application. First of all, it's got a light filter on there. The light filter can come off. This one just happens to be blue, so it looks like this. Once you flip it down, there's your white light right there. The amount of light that comes out of this thing is designed to penetrate and give you distance. So if I was at LEO at night, I would come up to the car using this, and I'd probably be able to put so much light into that car. Even if they had tinted windows, I would probably be able to start making out how many bodies might be in that car. And if you needed to, And even in law enforcement, is generally still true today. If all of a sudden somebody got out of that car, not only do I have a light in my hand, but I can strike him as well, because this is classified as a weapon of opportunity. So, hey, it's in your hand, utilize it accordingly until you can get to some of your other weapon systems. But that's where I would probably utilize this, is in a law enforcement capacity. You are gonna get distance with this turbo head on there. And let's get real, anything that has the word turbo attached to it, you know it's gonna be good. So obviously a little bit more mission specific light.
That good.
That good.
Let's talk about lasers real quick. Just hit on them briefly. Lasers to me aren't a super priority, because the way I train, the way I've become proficient over the years, lasers actually slow me down now. So if you're a shooter that's been running a gun for a long time, think about that. But also, I do run lasers, like on my J-frame here. I do have a laser on it. Well, say I'm in an unorthodox position. Maybe I'm laying in kind of a defensive position around my bed, and I could get the weapon system up and be able to have less exposure, and that's a great tool for that application there. Also, it's a great training application as well. A lot of great lasers coming out for training. This particular laser, I can put on a light switch on the wall, and I can sit there and do shooting and moving drills back and forth, and that's going to show how my core fundamentals are working. So it's also a great training tool as well. But great for home defense. I keep a laser, like I said, in home defense on my bedstand, and works great for me, and it works great for my family.
In regards to one other thing, a lot of law enforcement officers that end up carrying shields, you can never really get a good sight picture.
Yeah,
so some guys will run them out
too.
on shield guns, is usually where you'll find them in the LEO community. Aside from that, yeah, I think I shoot slower I know I shoot slower with a laser watching a damn thing jump than shooting iron. So very, very mission specific.
Moving into belts, we just talked about holsters. Say you went out and got a really good holster, okay? Well, that holster is only as good as the belt that supports it.
Okay, belts. They're obviously very important. They're primarily designed to hold your pants up. Now, the belts that you would buy
That's important.
in a store that is not specifically catering to the gun community, and understanding that there's going to be a lot of weight placed on that belt via magazines, the weight of the gun, the holster, all that starts to affect the belt. The
belt's going to wear out before the holster. That's for sure. That's
will.
what I find as the biggest
And
problem.
what you'll find is you need a good draw. So you need a really good holster, and then you need something that is going to be formed around you. So for instance, this Galco belt, this has a little bit, and some of them are even more aggressive than this, will have almost like a PVC. This thing, I will be able to pass this on to my children, and it will, by then, after I've worn it for probably 10 years, be worn in perfectly, but it'll still work really well. It's very thick. Obviously, one of the other key factors that you have to look at is belt loops, being able to run it through the pants that you're going to utilize carrying. There are different types of belts like this. You'll wonder why you're spending $80 to $100 on a really good leather belt, and there's a reason, and you'll notice that difference if you do carry weapons for a long time, especially if you shift over to something thinner and do or wear more of a dress belt with a suit. That's when it really pays off.
Yeah, this belt, I mean, this is a really good dress belt. I would wear this out when I'm wearing a suit, going to parties or out on town. But you'll find us wearing these Aries type belts here, because this is made out of, I'm actually real familiar with this. It's old scuba belt material that we used to use on our scuba tanks, and that stuff lasts forever. So it's a great material. It's really rigid, just like that Galco we picked up a second ago. And it'll last. It's Cordura, it's sewn good, it's got functionality, and for some of the running and gunning that we do and constantly being on the road and doing courses, these belts hold up through thick and thin. So always keep in mind that good belt selection is just as important as that holster.
Yeah, we even run our M4 magazines on this, so I'll run M4 mags on it, I'll run my handgun on it, and it always holds its shape and holds its mold. One of the other belts made by Aries is a rigger style belt. Generally, now this belt isn't made to put a load on, so you're not gonna rappel with this thing, but the practicalities for one purpose, I can tell you that most of the riggers belts that are sold out there, when has that person ever really rappelled with that thing? It's generally a very small percentage, but the rigidity in these belts that's what you need. This one's really thick. This one's inch and a half, vice inch and 3/4. So again, just make different considerations when looking for a belt. And I can tell you, generally, you will be paying more than $50 to buy a good belt. That's for sure.
All right, moving off of guns and into holsters. Holsters are also a very important lifestyle choice depending on what you do. I like to find a holster that maintains a shape, is durable, it's going to fit my particular application, and you got to think outside the box with that. We actually know a doctor that actually carries on his ankle because he's wearing scrubs, he's in an office all day long, and he can't put a gun on, so that's his only option. But he trains like that. He's actually a phenomenal shooter. So that's an extreme application there for like an ankle holster. Making sure that it is not going to come off since we're on that subject. You got an ankle holster, make sure it's secure. Make sure that when that weapon system's in there, it stays in there because this thing's on your foot. You're walking everywhere you go, you're running. You know, the situation's going to dictate. It could get very dynamic and this thing better not come out. The last thing you want to do is be racing grocery carts down the aisle in the grocery store and all of a sudden your gun goes flying out. You're going to clear that store out pretty quick. It's happened to Chris before. Let's look at waist holsters, inside the belt holsters. These holsters in particular are very good. I like them because they're comfortable. The gun comes out very easily, but the thing that you got to make sure on here is that the gun goes back in easily. Now this is very used by myself. It's been used a lot, so it's kind of lost its rigidity, and so therefore I would probably decommission this holster and get another one because I do like these, but it doesn't hold a shape anymore. So again, like that situation we talked about at active shooter, if I pull my gun out somewhere in a mall, I've got my kid in my hand, I better be able to get that gun holstered with a single hand and make sure that that happens quickly in case law enforcement or somebody else comes in, you don't want to act as that active shooter. So very important feature to look for there. That's why I typically stick with the Kydex holsters. These Ravens are real thin, real light, very durable. You guys can see what we put them through, and they fit concealed. They fit a full-size gun. I can conceal a full-size frame gun, M&P, with a light on it. But I have to dress to that holster and dress to that gun. But it still is a really good practical option.
Yeah, I would like to add one thing on this particular holster that Travis is talking about here. There are a couple different things to consider. Also is you'll see a lot of holsters where the gun actually, the muzzle's way down here. And it's kind of a cool look. Some people really like that look. But remember, what looks cool and what's going to work are completely two different things. I've seen a lot of shooters where they've got a really big, they've got an aftermarket front sight on there for shooting matches or just to be a better shooter because it gives them a better sight picture. And as they draw their gun, because of the way they draw, if you notice, the gun's gonna start down here, the muzzle's gonna start down here. And sometimes as they start to pull it out, they start to turn the gun, which is normal. It's what you do under stress. And I'll see that front sight snag. And the worst thing that's going to happen to you is you're gonna spin that gun. And most shooters will come up, catch it, and spin the gun right out of their hands. So the important thing if you're gonna get a holster like this is make sure that it generally fits flush to the muzzle. That's what I would stress.
And I'm guilty of carrying that style sight. Chris knows that. So I have to train that way to make sure it doesn't snag. You know, I have moved on to different holsters that I don't have that issue with, but again, keep that consideration in mind. Let's talk about pocket holsters. We already talked about pocket guns. Simple pocket holsters. This is something that you need to keep in mind with these. The biggest problem I see is you go to pull a gun out of your pocket and the whole holster and everything comes out with it. So if you do choose to carry that type of weapon system, then make sure you have a holster that's going to stay in your pocket, that has like a rubber mesh on the outside, and the gun comes out nice and clean and stays within that 2-second rule of concealment. We'll talk about cross draw belly bands. Belly band cross draw typically is something that you wear tight, kind of like a back brace underneath your shirt. Like I could easily wear a belly band under here if I was in a deep concealment. Probably a good option as a backup type of gun. Some of these smaller guns like a wheel gun, like the Smith & Wesson J-frames over there, is a really good option for a cross draw belly band. And I typically like to keep my button unbuttoned here where I can reach my hand in get to that cross draw, and it's actually pretty convenient. It's pretty efficient, and I can employ that backup gun if I need to from a belly band. Let's talk about appendage carries. Appendage carries are for a deep type of cover. Some people actually choose to carry them. Some people are actually very good at getting these guns out. It basically goes around like a diaper pretty much, and you have to pull your belt out and the gun's sitting there. Obviously you got to be aware that you know, if you are going to carry that, you've got to be very proficient at it, because obviously bad things can happen, and in that area I don't really want anything bad happening.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit on that really quick. If you find yourself in a fight, just know that whether you do a true, some guys are running Kydex or a leather appendix carry style, or that which is more, you know, up underneath your clothing and hidden, mainly because a lot of guys like it because, you know, when they bend over, they don't print with the weapon system.
Yeah,
it's still in a very convenient spot. Just remember, you could find yourself in a fight. And if that fight happens, you could and probably are most likely to go down to the ground. And if you get somebody on top of you, it's going to be hard to get your hand that you're utilizing to try to keep yourself, you know, to keep yourself in more of a defensive position working that person, if an opportunity provides it for you to get to a firearm because you think you're about to die. And again, that's your call, but you decide to make it a commitment and employ that weapon system. Can you get to it? I know I can get to the one on my side and at least get it into the side of them and then work that gun. But on some of the other style appendix carries, can you get your hand in between his body and your body with all that weight there, pushing down on top of you, and then not only that, but you are pulling out a hot gun at that point. And then once you, let's just say, get it out, how do you get that muzzle turned towards him or her? If that's what the case is. And that's where some other things that you need to think about come into play. So at least that's why, one of the reasons why I'll just keep mine on my side, because I can maneuver it however I want to. And I know as soon as that muzzle comes out, I have enough room to orientate it in case I end up getting into a fight. Because I know myself, and I even know Travis, we've been in a lot of fights before, and I've been really glad that I've been able to get my gun out and get it employed in time. And I can tell you that wouldn't work 95% of the times for us.
That's what I was going to say. 95% rule. It works in speed. It works in defensive situations like he just said. It works for carrying the gun that I need for that application to get that accuracy in case that's my decision that I make that day to take a shot at 50 yards across a mall. Works with that weapon system, so it comes around full circle. That 95% rule is huge, and that goes with the CCW lifestyle, what we're talking about. The only other holster I haven't really covered here is kind of a shoulder holster. You don't see them a lot anymore. There are still some people I see out there that do carry them, but something to take in consideration with that is look at how you're drawing the gun. Sometimes if you carry a larger frame gun, they do print, they make you look kind of funny, so you keep that in mind. If you have them going straight back, there are the shoulder holsters that they go down. So if you're wearing a suit or a jacket, make sure that it doesn't print or actually show itself easily, which sometimes those holsters will do. The other issue you got to look at there is when you're coming over here and drawing this weapon system and your thread is here, your muzzle's pointed backwards. So you've got to rotate that weapon system around to employ it. So if that's what you decide to carry, probably not the most efficient thing that I would carry, but if you do, you've got to make sure that you fit well into that 2-second rule number one, and you're not flagging a lot of people or yourself when you're actually employing the weapon system on a threat.
The biggest thing about all of this, with what we've been talking about and even in the class, I don't care how fast you are. Doesn't matter if you're a half-second draw and you can hit that plate, or an 8-inch circle at 7 yards in a half a second. If you never see it coming, it will not matter. And that goes back to the combat mindset that we harp on, that we talk about, because mindset is very important. Situational awareness is very important. And it's not going to matter how much, or the fact that you spent $2,000 on some kind of fancy concealment gun, and then you get the holster to match, and you feel like, you're on top of the world. But if you don't see it coming, or your situational awareness is not where it is, it won't matter. It won't matter. So a lot of this can be dealt with too with good situational awareness, which is avoidance as well. So just some other things to consider. All right, all that I'm saying is this is not my fault.
This is absolutely your fault.
Well, remember when you were doing the pre-flights and the checking of the airplane while our bags were being loaded?
I was loading the guns. How the hell can I do pre-flight when I'm loading the guns?
Well, you said you were going to do pre-flight, so I just came up here and started messing with buttons.
You don't push the flashing button.
Well, when it's flashing, that is saying that attention over here to the flashing button, you probably need to push this. Well, all that I'm going to do now is we're going to have to start this show from here. So.
Where's that go? Okay.
We're ready.
That didn't happen. That's fantasy land.
Signature move.
Okay, guys, 7-yard line, 2 shots.
My eye.
Garth, you gotta. What would be a definition in your words of mindset?
Drawing a blank, sorry.
Now that we've established that you're just completely brain dead at that point in time in your life.
Kapow! Pow! Let's do it again, one more on the right side.
Huh?
Nothing.
I can't hear. I have this Surefire Ear Pro in.
Oh, those things work really good.
I have it out now. You don't have to yell.
Okay.
Let me shift it to the left side since you're over there, Kyle.
He's gonna move his sock.
I've got a Smith & Wesson M&P compact in here, okay?
Oh, you have room for one, I don't. Boom, that shit just happened. That was excellent. Sure, I'm standing behind you, but I'm watching James, so actually he should be under the most amount of pressure right now, not you. Though, all you'll feel is just a closeness that we're sharing. God, that's just sent a tingle right through my body. So the fact remains is that, any questions?
Sorry, you had some on your face. All right, I have seen. Just show your mouth.
Get out! I got
That
it.
just went down my shirt.
I'll get it.
Yeah, no, it dropped. It's okay. It's okay, we're good.
Found it! Can you do me a favor for a sec? Can you hold my Surefire Ear Pro case?
I already have one of mine, thank you.
Yeah, but just hold mine for a second.
Don't shoot the camera.
I'm not.
When you get
I
up
hope
close,
not.
it's going to be kind of close. Beware.
Surprised Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't take one of these courses with us. He's probably gonna handle it. So do you like cookie dough? You like cookie dough?
Why?
Just curious.
Not really.
Why are you getting all, don't get all fucking defensive on me, man. I'm like, holy shit, it was just a food question and you're already starting to go into some kind of Dieter shit. Look, it was just cookie dough. Just, boom. You got the mag? Ching. Okay.
Double feed malfunction. Lock. Strip. Rack. Gas it up and go.
That would be awesome.
All right. Chris and I just crashed our plane in the jungle. It's what's up? Well, you're looking at me funny. I hate when your lip starts quivering like that. It bothers me.